Nicholas T. Davis, and welcome to another episode of From Pen to Paper. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have a paralegal degree, and I took some journalism courses back in the 80s. And I've been writing for 8 years, and I have 14 books. 2 sci-fi series, a fantasy series, and some children's books. And that being said, tonight's episode is about I have the wrong notes here. Tonight's episode is what to write about. Now, you'll see I have a board up here, the whiteboard, and I wrote it all down on the whiteboard, but it's obviously you can't see it. It's too far away. But I will show my notes after the program. I'll post them on Facebook, and you'll be able to take my notes, and you can magnify them, make them bigger, or whatever. Okay, so here we go. What do I write about? That's tonight's episode. Remember last time we talked about the elements of a story. We talked about the beginning, the middle, and the climax, and the end. I know I had some streaming problems. Some got cut off. I am going to do a new episode at a further date. I was using my phone, and my phone didn't work as well as this new laptop I bought. Works much better, and it streams a lot better. So hopefully we won't have any more issues like that. I know we did it last night with a concert. When we did the concert last night, it turned out perfect. But when we did the Saturday, we had technical problems. So here we go with this episode, anyways. Excuse me, I'm a little tired today. All the hustle bustle and parties and going to shopping and all sorts of things. So, concerts, everything else, Okay, so what do I write about? Well, you can write about what you know. That's what you should write about. Write about what you know. I mean, you can write about past memories. You can write about people or places or events that you might have been to. A good example to that, if you're new to writing, I'm writing a book about our family camp. Someday I hope to publish it, probably maybe next year if I can get enough information and get it together. It's a little tougher because I have to piece it all together. Past memories of myself, my brothers and sisters, and everybody. So it's a little tough, but we'll get it together. You can also write about a subject that interests you, or a cause you are passionate about. Like I used to belong to a group called Father's Rights, and we would fight to get visitation for our children in custody when we felt it was warranted. And I was in that group, and I someday I'd like to write a book about that as well. Write about my time with Father's Rights. So that's something you could write about that you're passionate about. Something else, or like something that interests you. Suppose you like fishing. You can write about fishing. You can write about camping, whatever floats your boat. If your goal is to make money, however, then you have to find out what market or genre you're selling to and write in that genre. Like, what's popular at the time? Is it romance? Is it adventure? Is it horror? Is it sci-fi? Whatever you think is, you do your research, which we'll talk about later about research. But that's going to be next. But you have to do your research because, you have to know what's out there and what's actually selling. Okay, if you want to write that way. I prefer to write what I know about and what interests me because Writing for a market is tough because you're boxed into a certain ideal of writing. So, if you're writing romance, you have to know how to write romance or be in, at least like writing romance. Okay, so now we're going to talk about research. Well, there's many ways you can do research. One of them is through the internet. But I'll tell you, if you're going to do it through the internet, make sure you're using reliable sources. Because you don't want later on to write a book and come back and somebody says, oh, well, I saw somewhere else where that wasn't true. You want to make sure that if you're writing through the internet and you're writing about events or places or anything like that, news events, you want to make sure that you get all your information as accurate as possible. Because you don't want to be sued later on for it not being right. Okay, and another source of research is the library. You can go out and get books out, or do your research at the library through encyclopedias. Or when I was in college, we used to have to look up cases, and we used a thing called Nextlaw, which was great online. It was you could look up a case, and it would give you all the details of the case and all the elements of the case and everything involved with that case. So it really was a useful tool. Okay, and books are useful too. I mean, you can take parts of books, that you read and use that information, incorporate in your books, as long as you don't plagiarize. Okay, and personal experience is another one. From your own past or from something you've seen or heard, or suppose you were involved in a airplane crash. You could write about an airplane crash. Later on, you could, what it was like to you, or even like being stuck out on a boat somewhere and the engine dies. That's happened to me before, and you're kind of stranded. But as long as you're close to, a popular area, you're saved. I was lucky because I had somebody who was, a lot of boats went by, so somebody offered to help me. But if you're out in the middle of Lake Ontario, like my sister, my dad was once, there's nobody to help you. You just you're on your own. So that's that situation. But another thing about research I like to say is, like, if you're writing about like the Civil War, make sure your weaponry, the weaponry that was used in that war. You go and you look it up and you make sure all that stuff's factual and you know it. If you're writing about science fiction, it's usually the technical terms. How warp drive engines work, how fusion drive engine works, light sails. All that stuff is part of quantum physics. All the quantum physics involved and stuff like that. Okay, and if you're writing about like sailing in the ocean, you ought to know your nautical terms. Make sure you know what a port side is and a starboard, and what the aft of a ship is. I mean, I'm in my fantasy book. I write about the ocean, and I read about. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings meets Pirates of the Caribbean. So it's you get that the nautical terms become very important when you're on the sea and you're in a sea battle or something. All that stuff becomes important. Like you have to know what the mainsail is, what the top sail is, all that stuff. All right. Enough said. Next thing I would suggest is to keep your notes in notebooks, computer files for later reference. I mean, suppose you're creating a language like we do in fantasy. You'll want a glossary of all the terms, what they mean in Elven language or whatever creature you have, what language they speak in, and all the terms involved in that. and you want to keep it like on one file, maybe keep like that, or maybe the history of that world. You'll want to keep the history, the storyline, timeline, as it pertains to your story. Or maybe you just want to do an outline. An outline of your book, what chapter by chapter, what you're going to do. I used to do that. I not so much anymore, but I used to. Now I just kind of fly off the cuff and just go on to the next chapter. But when I first started, that was very helpful, doing it structured. Then I kind of knew how to lead the action into the story. Okay. But once you get a series, it takes off on its own, and the characters kind of write the story for you, which is wonderful. You know how each character acts, and they'll go, one thing will lead to another, and they'll go into the next phase of action. Okay, and you want to create a physical copy of your book. Now I do this. What I do is I print. Once I get done with the book, I print it all off. That way I've got a physical copy of the book. Okay? And you can do that through a notebook. You can do that through, printer. You want to make sure that you have a hard copy in case you lose the computer copies, which I'll talk about now. The flash drives. You want to have at least two flash drives besides your hard drive and your computer with the story on it. And you ask why so many? Well, it's very easily, and I've done it, to take a story and you're writing and you do a whole chapter and then you don't save it and then you lose it. You get off and it's gone. It happened to me with a whole chapter once. Fortunately, I still had it up here, so I was able to rewrite it almost word for word, which is amazing. I amazed myself. I didn't think I could do it, but it's you want it. You want to back it up. So if you lose it in one spot, you got it in another spot. And if you do like 3 or 4 copies, there's no way you're going to lose that story. Now I know it's hard to, you might get kind of lazy and not save the other copies, but the best thing to do is just take the copy you have and save it to the flash drive. You save it to the flash drive, it'll say replace the one you got, and you say yes. That way you always got a new copy of it. Okay? And that's another thing with that. And always while you're writing, it's best to save a page or two for the same reason I just told you. If you lose 5,000 words, you're in trouble. You got to start over. But if you lose 300, that's not too bad. You can write 300. So it's always good to save like after a page or two and make sure that you save it. Okay? And then if you're still having trouble writing, you can start by creating a daily journal, adding your emotions as well as reporting the events of the day. Okay, journals are great for creating a style and helping you develop your grammatical skills. There are also self-help books on writing, as well as writing exercises, both online and in print and in person too. There's some out there, some groups you can go to for writing, but right now with the COVID going on, it's probably not very, very likely that you get in a class right now. But hopefully in the future we can get back to meeting with other writers. I used to belong to a critic group, but I kind of left that group. But critic groups are good and bad. I can get into that later with the competition and the networking, why they are. We'll talk more about that later. The next thing I'd like to talk about is showing versus telling. Okay, a lot of writers like to talk about it, showing versus telling, and what is it? What is showing versus telling? Well, there's two. I have two passages here, and you kind of get the idea. Okay, the first one, Jeff, still shaken, moved his right arm towards the beam. The vibration passed through him like a knife through butter. Now it sounds like an easy, simple statement, right? Well, that's telling. That's not really, and that's boring. You write like that, it's boring. He did this, she did that, they jumped over, they did this, they did that. You have to do some of that in your story, but don't leave it like that. This is the way you should write it. This is showing. Jeff, who was still shaken from his last encounter, proceeded to move his right arm toward the beam, as the powerful vibration seared through his limb in excruciating pain he never experienced before. Now, when I say that, you can feel his pain. You can feel what he's feeling, because it's excruciating, and excruciating pain is like 9 out of 10, so you can feel that, and that's, and that's how you do it. You do it. Telling is merely stating the action, whereas showing actually puts you in the story. And it displays how the character is feeling by sight, by taste, by touch, and sound. And it's like you really embellish on how they're feeling. And dialogue is a great way to do this. It's useful in progressing the story by displaying the action within the character's own voice, and their actions are dictated by what they say. So that makes a lot of sense with that. So, and you just have to have a good balance between the narration and the dialogue. Okay? And that's that. And that's all I have for today. Next week we'll be talking about, next week we're going to take a break. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. And what we'll be talking about in 2 weeks is characterization. And we'll be talking about characters, how to make interesting characters, and what is needed to create a character. Okay, and we'll talk more about that next time. So, until then, this is Nicholas T. Davis. Oh, also, if I have a couple specials before I go. I still have the specials for the next 3 days that I've been posting till Christmas, or 4 days. The entire Dimension Lapse series, all 6 books for $45, and then I also have the whole Bargo Linden series for plus Joe Garkey, the new one, for $45, and I also have my children's pack with 2 coloring books and a readable book for $15 with crayons. And come January, I'll be having a new special. It's going to be called a starter kit, and it will have it'll have Barbara Linden, and it will have Dimension Lapse, and it will have Tolkien Connection. So those are the first 3 starter books of each series, and the side story book, which is the Tolkien Connection. So that'll be in January. So, and you can get my books. They're available at NicholasTDavisBooks.com, and I'm on YouTube, Nicholas T. Davis Books with a capital N on YouTube. So we'll see you next in 2 weeks, rather. And I'll be back with Nancy in a couple of days with some little karaoke songs, couple of karaoke songs that we couldn't do on the concert because we finally got that cable fixed. So it was a bad cable. So we'll be doing those too, probably Thursday night or Friday night, one or the other. So we'll see you then. And we'll see you in 2 weeks for my next class.